was supposed to be just another exploratory mission. For centuries, we, the era, had drifted across the vastness of the universe, cataloging planets, studying life forms, and leaving behind our knowledge to help those who showed potential. Our mission was simple: observe, learn, and guide where necessary. We were a race of unmatched intellect, a civilization that had mastered the stars. Our technology was so advanced that we could manipulate time, bend gravity, and understand the very fabric of space itself. But despite all our knowledge, we never expected to find a species like humanity. We first discovered Earth from a distance, peering at it through the lens of our advanced telescopes. The planet seemed ordinary, a small blue dot in a vast, unremarkable corner of the galaxy. The humans, as we later called them, were primitive, no more advanced than the other species we had encountered. They lived in primitive societies, struggling to survive in a world ravaged by conflict, ignorance, and disease. There was nothing extraordinary about them. At least, that was what we initially thought. Our leaders, the Council of the Era, made the decision to make contact. After all, it was our duty to guide developing species. And while humanity was far from achieving space travel, we believed they had potential, perhaps not to rival us, but certainly to evolve into something greater with a little assistance. We could teach them the secrets of the universe, elevate them to new heights, and they would in turn offer us their gratitude. It was a simple, logical plan. We had done it many times before. The first few encounters were nothing short of mesmerizing. When we arrived on Earth, the humans saw us as gods. Our arrival caused a stir, a mixture of awe and reverence. They had no idea what we truly were, only that we were far beyond anything they had ever seen. They worshipped us as beings of immense power, their primitive minds unable to comprehend the true nature of our existence. They were like children, eager to please, offering us gifts of food, precious metals, and artifacts. In their eyes, we were saviors, and we, of course, allowed them to believe it. After all, it was easier to shape them with their trust and adoration than with force. At first, we stayed in the shadows, observing them, studying their behavior, their societies, and their cultures. We were careful not to reveal too much, not wanting to overwhelm them. But soon our curiosity got the better of us. We began to reveal our knowledge, slowly, methodically, offering them glimpses of the wonders we could share. We showed them how to cultivate their land, how to heal their sick, how to build. Their cities grew, their technology advanced, and for a time, it seemed like everything was progressing perfectly. They looked up to us with awe and gratitude, and we allowed it, thinking that with our guidance, they would one day achieve greatness. It wasn't until later that I began to see cracks in the facade. It was subtle at first. Small gestures, faint hints of resentment in their eyes, a few too many questions. But the humans were clever. They had begun to understand in their own way that we were not infallible gods. They weren't entirely dependent on us, though they didn't know it yet. In their hearts, some began to wonder whether they were truly evolving, or if we had been holding them back all along. I couldn't shake the feeling that we had made a mistake, though I couldn't yet articulate why. The humans weren't simply learning from us. They were changing in ways we hadn't predicted. Our initial success in guiding humanity through their primitive stages led to a sense of complacency among us. We had become accustomed to the way civilizations responded to our influence. Most species, upon receiving our aid, flourished quickly, acknowledging our superiority and adopting the ways of our knowledge. But with humanity, something felt different, though we couldn't place our finger on it at the time. The first real sign that we had made an error came slowly. At first, it appeared as though the humans were embracing our teachings. They built great cities with our help, harnessing the elements for energy and health. They flourished under our guidance, their wars and conflicts becoming less frequent as they learned how to live in harmony. Their technological advancements accelerated as they absorbed our knowledge, and we marveled at how quickly they adapted to the ideas we provided. Yet, as they grew more sophisticated, they seemed to become more dependent on us. Instead of rising to their own potential, they started to rely on us for everything: knowledge, resources, and solutions to their problems. It wasn't that they were ungrateful. In fact, they were more than grateful, too grateful. The more we gave them, the more they depended on us, and it began to feel as though they were no longer progressing as they should have. Their development was stagnating. We had started out believing that our influence would help them become equal partners in the galactic community, but we soon realized that far from becoming equal, they had started to see us as their keepers, their masters. One of the first signs of the shift came when they stopped asking questions. At first, the humans were curious, eager to learn and understand, but soon their curiosity waned. They ceased questioning our advice, stopped seeking alternatives, and instead began to follow us blindly. They no longer challenged our methods or ideas. They had come to rely on us so completely that their own creativity, their own critical thinking was stifled. They were evolving, yes, but they were evolving in a direction we had not intended, toward dependence, not independence. We began to share more of our advanced technologies, hoping that the increased knowledge would spark a new wave of innovation. But what we didn't realize was that we were stifling their own ingenuity. They became obsessed with imitating our creations rather than creating their own. Their great minds, once filled with potential, became fixated on the tools we had given them instead of developing their own tools, their own solutions. We thought we were giving them the world, but in reality, we were giving them a cage, wrapped in the trappings of comfort and security. Then there was the moment when it became undeniable. A human named Kira, a leader among her people, came to us. She was different from the others. Where most humans bowed in reverence, she stood with confidence, almost as though she had an understanding we lacked. She spoke to us plainly, without fear, and for the first time we began to hear the dissatisfaction in their voices. She was no longer grateful. She was angry. "We are not pets," she said, her voice steady and clear, filled with a quiet strength. "You think you are helping us, but you're holding us back. You've given us the tools, but you've taken away our freedom. We were never meant to be kept in your shadow. We are human, and we will not be your slaves." Her words struck me with such force that they reverberated in my mind long after she left. We had always thought we were doing what was best for them. We had never imagined that our intervention would have such an unintended consequence. Kira's words were like a spark, igniting something in the humans that had been buried beneath their admiration for us. It was the beginning of a shift, a realization that would come to define the future of our relationship with them. They weren't just looking for knowledge anymore. They were looking for freedom. They wanted to break free from our influence, from the invisible chains we had wrapped around them, and we hadn't even seen it coming. As the days passed, I couldn't ignore the growing unrest. Whispers of rebellion began to spread. The humans were starting to question everything we had taught them, everything we had given them. What we had once thought of as gratitude was quickly turning into something else: resentment, frustration, and above all, a desire to stand on their own. We had given them everything, but in doing so, we had taken away the one thing they valued most: their independence. They weren't pets to be cared for. They were humans, capable of greatness on their own terms. And we had made a grave mistake in thinking otherwise. As the weeks passed, the tension between us and the humans grew palpable. The signs of discontent became more evident, small gestures of rebellion creeping into the daily lives of those who had once revered us. But it wasn't until I observed Kira again that the full magnitude of our mistake hit me. She wasn't just a leader anymore. She had become the voice of a movement, a revolution in the making. She was different from the others, unafraid to speak her mind, even in the presence of our most esteemed scholars. Where others offered their gratitude in hushed tones, Kira spoke boldly, challenging us. Her words echoed through the halls of the cities we had helped build, a rallying cry for the oppressed. I had heard whispers of her ideas, But it wasn't until I met her face to face that I truly understood the shift in the human's mentality. The very people we had uplifted were now beginning to question the foundation upon which our relationship was built. They no longer saw us as benefactors, but as oppressors, even if we hadn't meant to be. When I met Kira in one of the great forums of their capital, I thought it would be another meeting where I would explain the purpose of our guidance and the benefits of our intervention. But she wasn't interested in hearing our justifications. She had already made up her mind. She wasn't afraid of us, and her eyes held a quiet defiance that no other human had dared show. "We didn't ask for your help," Kira said, her voice firm yet filled with an undeniable sadness. "You came here thinking we were helpless, thinking we needed to be taught everything. You took our world and shaped it in your image, but you've ignored who we are. You've made us believe we could never stand on our own. You've taken our independence, our right to be who we are, and turned us into something less. I won't stand for it anymore." Her words stung like a slap across the face. We had always thought of ourselves as protectors, as guides for the lost. We had believed that we were offering them the gift of knowledge and security, helping them escape the brutality of their primitive past. Yet here was a human, one who had benefited most from our wisdom, telling us that we had done more harm than good. She wasn't asking for more gifts. She wasn't asking for more of our knowledge. She was asking for freedom, the very thing we had unwittingly denied them. I wanted to argue. I wanted to remind her of how far they had come, how much we had given them. But her gaze was unwavering, and deep down I knew that she was right. We had taken away their autonomy. In our efforts to help, we had stripped them of the very qualities that made them human: resilience, independence, and the drive to chart their own course. They no longer saw us as benefactors, they saw us as captors. Kira's words reverberated in my mind long after our meeting. "We are not pets," she had said, and now I understood. It was not just a rhetorical statement. It was a truth, one that we had ignored for far too long. The humans had always been capable of greatness. They just needed the space to find it. We had smothered them with our help, treating them like children who could never learn to walk on their own. And now they were standing up, breaking free from the shackles we had imposed. In the days that followed, I could feel the tide turning. The quiet whispers of discontent were no longer whispers. They had become a roar. The humans were organizing, planning, and rallying around Kira's message. They were no longer content to accept our help without question. They were ready to challenge us, to take back what they believed was rightfully theirs, their freedom. And in their eyes, we were no longer their saviors. We had become the enemy. The rebellion, at first a quiet rumble, soon exploded into full-scale defiance. It began with small pockets of resistance, whispers in the shadows, acts of civil disobedience, sabotage in the factories we had built for them. But as Kira's influence grew, so did the scale of the movement. What was once a single voice of dissent had become a unified, determined force. And we, proud, powerful, were unprepared for what came next. In the cities, the humans began to tear down the symbols of our influence. Statues of us, once placed proudly at the center of their cities, were defaced and destroyed. The temples they had built in our honor became empty. The sacred halls filled not with reverence, but with anger. They stopped seeking our counsel, stopped following the rules we had set for them. The once peaceful streets became battlegrounds. Riots broke out in the heart of every major city. Humans, once docile and obedient, now fought with an intensity and determination we had never expected. At first, we thought it was just a fleeting moment, a passing storm of anger that would dissipate once they saw reason. But the more we intervened, the worse it became. We sent peacekeepers, soldiers, our most powerful warriors, to quell the unrest. We believed that with enough force, we could restore order. After all, we had faced rebellions before in other worlds. We were never unprepared. But this time, it was different. The humans didn't cower. They fought back, and they fought back hard. Their resistance grew stronger every day. They had learned from us, not just in the ways of technology, but in the ways of war. They knew our tactics, our strategies. They had begun to develop their own weapons, repurposing our technology to use against us. What had once been a symbol of our benevolence, the technology we had gifted them, had become their weapon of choice in the battle for their freedom. They were no longer helpless. They were resourceful, inventive, and relentless. And the more we tried to suppress them, the more determined they became. It was as if each defeat only fueled their will to fight. They weren't simply fighting for survival anymore. They were fighting for something far greater. They were fighting for their autonomy, for the right to chart their own future without interference from us. This was no longer about rebellion. It was about liberation. I watched as cities that had once flourished under our guidance now burned, their streets filled with the sounds of chaos. Humans fought not just with weapons, but with ideas that had been buried for so long under the weight of our influence. They were no longer content to accept our gifts without questioning them. They had learned to think for themselves, to believe in their own capacity for greatness. Kira became their symbol, an unwavering leader who could no longer be swayed by the promises of peace we offered. She was not interested in our counsel. She had found a new purpose, a new direction. The humans followed her with unshakable loyalty. Her presence was enough to rally the masses, and her words were like fire, igniting a passion in their hearts that could not be extinguished. We, the Era, were beginning to realize that we had underestimated them in the worst way possible. These humans, these creatures we had once thought so small and insignificant, had found within themselves the strength to defy us. They were no longer the helpless beings we had initially assumed them to be. They were a force that was now pushing us to the brink. And despite all our power, despite all our knowledge, we were helpless to stop them. Every attempt to quell the uprisings only seemed to make things worse. The humans were everywhere, moving faster than we could predict, adapting to every strategy we employed. It became clear that we were not dealing with a rebellion of desperation anymore. We were dealing with a revolution. And we were losing. The revolution spread faster than we could ever have anticipated. In every corner of Earth, the humans gathered, organized, and fought. They were no longer a fractured species, divided by their petty conflicts. They had found a common cause, a unifying thread that connected them in ways we never thought possible. Their strength was not just in their numbers or in their weapons, though both were formidable. No, the true strength of their resistance lay in their resolve, their refusal to be controlled, to be dictated to by a species that saw itself as their superior. The more we tried to control them, the more their defiance grew. We had underestimated them for so long, believing that their primitive nature would always be their downfall. But, in their desperation, they found something greater than the sum of their parts: unity. They began to cooperate in ways we had never seen before. What had once been isolated groups fighting against us now became a cohesive, highly coordinated force. They had learned from our technology, yes, but they had also learned something else from us: how to organize, how to strategize, how to persist in the face of overwhelming odds. Every time we thought we had broken their spirit, they came back stronger. We sent more of our most skilled warriors to quell the uprisings, but even they were outmatched. We employed all of our advanced technology, every weapon at our disposal, but the humans adapted. They learned our tactics, they used our own tools against us, and they refused to back down. It was like trying to hold back an ocean with a dam that was cracking under the pressure. No matter how many times we struck, they always rose again. Kira's presence was like a flame that would not be extinguished. We had hoped that by removing her, we would break the heart of the revolution, but instead, her influence only grew stronger. She became more than just a leader. She became a symbol of hope, of defiance. To the humans, she was their embodiment of freedom, the one who had refused to be cowed. the one who had shown them that they were more than just subjects in our eyes. She was the one who had taught them that they could stand on their own 2 feet without the crutch of our guidance. And it wasn't just Kira. Across Earth, new leaders emerged, inspired by her example, each one more determined than the last. It was a movement that could not be contained, no matter how much we tried. We had thought that by controlling their cities, by giving them the tools they needed, we had tamed them. But instead, we had fed the fire of rebellion. Their thirst for independence had been stoked, and now it was burning out of control. In the midst of the chaos, I found myself questioning everything. The humans weren't simply resisting us out of anger or ignorance. They had tapped into something deeper, a primal urge to be free, to be masters of their own destiny. It was something we had never fully understood, something we had taken for granted. As an advanced species, we had never had to fight for our freedom. We had never had to struggle to exist on our own terms. But the humans who had been on the brink of extinction only a few centuries ago now fought with a passion that I could no longer dismiss as primitive or naive. Their struggle was not just about survival. It was about identity. It was about reclaiming what we had stolen from them. We had made the mistake of believing that they were not worthy of the same autonomy we had. We had believed that our knowledge, our power, was enough to justify controlling their world. But in doing so, we had denied them the very thing that had made them human, their right to choose their own path. I watched as the humans began to reclaim their cities, their lands, and their technologies. What had once been our great gift to them, our advanced tools, were now used to break the chains we had wrapped around them. It was clear now. The humans were not just fighting for their survival. They were fighting for their freedom, their identity, and they would not stop until they had it. The revolution was no longer a mere spark. It had become an unstoppable force, and it was consuming everything in its path. We, the era, were no longer the ones in control. We were the ones fighting to maintain our hold, and with every battle lost, the realization dawned on me we had made a great mistake. The humans weren't pets, as we had once thought. They were more powerful, more resilient, and more capable than we could have ever imagined. And in our arrogance, we had underestimated them. Now they were the ones who were in control, and we were on the verge of losing everything. In the days that followed, we watched as our once proud empire on Earth crumbled. The resistance, once thought to be a fleeting outburst of discontent, had become a full-blown insurrection. Kira's movement spread like wildfire, burning through cities, governments, and structures we had spent centuries building. The humans were no longer content to simply challenge our authority. They were dismantling everything we had worked for. And what made it all the more unnerving was that they didn't just want to remove us. They wanted to rewrite the very fabric of their society, to erase the traces of our influence as if we had never been there. At first, we tried to contain the rebellion through force. We unleashed all of our technological might, sending in fleets of ships, deploying our best-trained warriors, and utilizing weapons that could turn entire cities to ash in a matter of minutes. But the humans were relentless. They were resourceful, and they used everything they had learned from us against us. They hacked into our systems, turned our own weapons against our forces, and used guerrilla tactics we had never anticipated. The humans were no longer the pawns we had assumed them to be. They were equal, perhaps even superior to us in their ability to adapt, to learn, and to fight. As the conflict dragged on, I began to realize something even more unsettling. Our defeat wasn't just a possibility, it was becoming inevitable. Every attempt to retake the cities we had once helped build failed. They had fortified their positions, cut off our supply lines, and rallied more and more of their kind to their cause. It wasn't just the military forces that resisted us. Ordinary humans, farmers, workers, children, were joining the fight, taking up arms, sabotaging our infrastructure, and refusing to back down. The unity among them was something we had never seen before. They weren't just fighting because they had to. They were fighting because they believed in something more than survival. The leadership of the era convened to discuss what could be done to turn the tide. There was talk of using more drastic measures, deploying weapons capable of wiping out entire populations, erasing the rebellion before it could gain further momentum. But even the thought of such measures felt wrong. I could see the weariness in the eyes of my fellow leaders. They had never faced an enemy like this. For the first time in our history, we were on the back foot. We had underestimated the humans. We had assumed their dependence on us was a sign of weakness, but it had been the very thing that had fueled their determination to stand on their own. They weren't fighting for mere survival anymore. They were fighting for a future free from our control. One night, I went to the front lines, hoping to understand better what was happening, hoping that I could find some way to break through to the humans, to Kira. I encountered a small group of them, armed yet surprisingly calm. They didn't see me as an enemy at first. Instead, they looked at me as if I were a curious being, as though my presence didn't even register as a threat. One of them, a man no older than 20, spoke to me directly. "You're not here to help us anymore, are you?" he asked, his voice filled with a strange kind of sadness. I didn't know how to respond. I had come with the intention of ending this war, of negotiating peace, but I couldn't deny that, deep down, I knew it wasn't peace they wanted. They wanted more than that. They wanted freedom. The realization hit me like a cold wave. For all our advanced knowledge, for all our technology, we had never understood what it meant to truly let go, to allow a species to chart its own course, without interference, without control. We had assumed that we knew best, that we could shape the humans into something they were never meant to be, something they didn't want to be. I returned to our command center that night, my mind reeling with the implications. The humans were no longer fighting just to free themselves from us. They were fighting to reclaim their own identity, their own sense of purpose, and in doing so, they were showing us something profound. Their strength didn't lie in their numbers or in their technology. It lay in their will. They had the power to define who they were, and they were not going to let anyone take that from them. Not even us. I stood there, alone, in the midst of a world that was changing rapidly, and I realized something that had once been unthinkable. We were losing, and it wasn't because they were weaker than us. It was because they were stronger than we had ever given them credit for. The humans were not our subjects. They were our equals, and they had found their voice. We had made the great mistake of thinking they were pets. But they weren't. They never had been. And now it was too late for us to fix what we had broken. As the days turned into weeks, the rebellion against our forces grew bolder. The humans, once thought incapable of rising against us, had become a unified, formidable force. Their resistance was relentless and their willpower unshakable. Kira's influence had blossomed into something that transcended leadership. It had become a movement. The war, which had initially seemed like a temporary disruption, had now become the defining struggle of a generation. And as we watched our empire fall, it became increasingly clear that there was no turning back. The Era Council convened again, this time in a state of absolute desperation. We had no choice but to acknowledge the truth. We had underestimated humanity in ways that no one could have foreseen. Their strength wasn't just in their adaptability or their technology, it was in their resolve, in their refusal to be dominated. We had assumed that we could shape them into something we wanted, something we could control. But they had risen beyond our influence. They were fighting not for survival, but for their freedom, their dignity, their right to exist on their own terms. We had taught them the tools of civilization, but they had used them to undo everything we had built. And now we found ourselves on the defensive, trying to protect the very world we had once molded for them. I watched from afar, helpless as the humans reclaimed their cities, their territories, their very way of life. What had once been the shining example of our benevolence had become a symbol of oppression to them. We had tried to pacify them with more advanced technology, more knowledge, more power, but none of it had worked. It had only fed their desire for freedom, their need to prove to themselves that they were capable of standing on their own without our intervention. They had reclaimed the cities, but they had also reclaimed their own identity in the process. In the final stages of the conflict, I witnessed something I could hardly comprehend. In the midst of battle, I saw humans, ordinary men and women, fighting alongside one another as if they were one unified entity. They had learned to trust each other, to rely on each other, and in doing so, they had become more than just a collection of individuals. They had become a true force, something that even we, the mighty era, could no longer subdue. Kira, standing at the forefront of the revolution, had become a legend. Her name spread far and wide, inspiring not just the humans on Earth, but also others across the galaxy who had been watching from the shadows. The idea of humanity's fight for freedom, their rejection of our control, resonated far beyond the confines of their world. Kira had become more than just a leader. She had become a symbol of hope, a beacon for all those who had suffered under the yoke of other, more powerful civilizations. Her movement was no longer just about Earth. It was about breaking free from all forms of oppression. And then it happened. The moment I had feared. The moment I had seen coming but could never truly prepare for. The era began to realize that we could no longer win. The forces we had sent to Earth were in disarray, defeated by tactics we hadn't anticipated and by the strength of the human spirit. We were losing the war, and with it, our grip on a world we had once thought was ours to command. It wasn't just that we were losing the battle, we were losing the narrative. We had tried to teach the humans that they were nothing more than subjects to us, but they had proven us wrong. They had taken our gifts, our knowledge, and turned them against us. What we had once believed was a token of our superiority had become a weapon in their hands, a weapon of liberation. In the final days of the war, there was no great clash, no monumental last stand. There was just a slow, steady withdrawal, a retreat that spoke volumes. We had no choice but to concede. The humans had done the impossible. They had defeated us, not through brute force, but through something far more powerful, their unwavering will to be free. They had reclaimed their planet, their autonomy, and their future. I stood in the ruins of what had once been a thriving city, watching as the humans celebrated their victory. They weren't just celebrating the defeat of our forces, they were celebrating the birth of a new era, an era in which they could finally take control of their own destiny. They had fought for this moment, and they had won. As I looked on, a part of me, one that had once believed in the superiority of my own kind, had to admit that we had made a grave mistake. We had treated the humans as lesser beings, pets to be trained and controlled. But they had proven us wrong. They had shown us that the true strength of a species lay not in its power or technology, but in its ability to define itself, to stand up and fight for what it believed in. The revolution was over, and the humans had won.